there's an increase of the supply of a money substitute in the economy without a corresponding increase in the gold and silver backing, inflation occurs. Inflation is an invisible form of taxation that irresponsible governments inflict on their citizens. Now that's a safe statement, and what they should be saying is inflation is an invisible form of unlawful taxation by a foreign private body of criminals pretending to be government, and they inflict it on the people and the nationals who they're claiming to be their citizens or stock. That's what it should be saying. But if you understand the peripheral information, when you read things like that, you would make that interpretation and not be wrong. But you would not fail not to make that interpretation. Are we clear? And what we recognize is many people, when given information, can't think on a multifaceted level. And therefore, they're easy victims to these persons who are claiming to be Americans, who, when they're not, they're really Europeans, who claim to be white people, which is a legal status, and they're not, they're Europeans, and are claimed to be government, and they're not, they're private corporation registered in France and in Puerto Rico now. And the whole platform of the miseries of the people has been predicated on them being a fraud operating and we being in a fraud status and operating and looking for remedy, which logically cannot happen. Cannot and will not. Now, you can't make the Romans change. However, you can take responsibility and change you. So if you're showing the marked debt, because we're showing you the marked debt, you can't say that you haven't been told, and you can't say this is so vague that you can't comprehend it or understand it, but it commands that you change your language. It commands that you correct how you look at things. And it commands that you stop teaching false concepts to your own children, putting them in a system that you turn around and march and complain about. Because the lack of knowledge is designed to maintain the corrupt platform, which is the system that our people keep claiming about. And the system is unum sanctum. It's not the system of racism, it's unum sanctum. It's not a system, this generic system of racism. It's unum sanctum. Name Frankenstein. You get the point. And if you can't name Frankenstein, you have no legal argument. Are we clear? Clear. Now, the Federal Reserve Bank, who controls the supply and movement of Federal Reserve notes, has everybody fooled. They have access to an unlimited supply of Federal Reserve notes, paying only for the printing costs of what they need. Federal Reserve notes are nothing more than promissory notes. Put down promissory notes. Get used to it. For U.S. Treasury securities. So put U.S. Treasury securities, which are also called T-bills. A promise to pay the debt to the Federal Reserve Bank. And pay attention to this paragraph, and we're going to go into other issues. There's a fundamental difference between, quote unquote, paying and discharging a debt. To pay a debt, you must pay with value or substance, i.e. gold, silver, barter, or commodity. With Federal Reserve notes, you can only discharge a debt. Are we clear? Write that paragraph, write that sentence down, because if you don't comprehend that, a lot of information that you'll receive to try to help you, you'll revert back to the connotative linguistics and then bury yourself in a court process. Are we clear? So there's a fundamental difference. So we're talking fundamental, that means foundation, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Between paying and discharging a debt. To pay a debt, you must pay with value or substance, i.e. gold, silver, barter, or commodity. With Federal Reserve notes, you can only discharge a debt. So there's nothing else that can be done with Federal Reserve notes but a discharge. Why is it that the people don't know what a discharge is? You see the point? Congressional records? You cannot pay a debt with a debt currency system. In other words, you can't neutralize a negative with a negative. You cannot service a debt with a currency that has no backing in value or substance. No contract in common law, so put contract and common law, get used to it, is valid unless it involves an exchange of good and valuable consideration. So consider the components that compromises legitimate contract law. We're not going into it, but get used to it. All right? Familiarize yourself. Because these things and the knowledge of these things are necessary for you to argue any case in litigation in relationship to someone claiming a charge against your estate, or the straw that they created that represents your estate, whether or not you knew you had an estate or not. Because the outcome will not be in your favor. Are we clear?
Clear.
So you cannot service a debt with a currency that has no backing in value or substance. No contract in common law is valid unless it involves an exchange of good and valuable consideration. Unpayable debt transfers power and control to the sovereign power structure that has no interest in money, law, equity, or justice because they have so much wealth already. In other words, they've been robbing these people for so many generations. This is how they've been robbing the people, because peonage and what you've been calling connotative slavery has been institutionalized, and they've accumulated all of the wealth from you while making you think that you've been working and getting wealthier. When you've been sharecropping, even your own labor has been sharecropped, or what is called hypothecated. So write that word down, hypothecated. And then we're going to go into here. Assets of the debtor can also be hypothecated, which means to pledge something as a security. Write down the word security. Without taking possession of it. So people have things in their possession and thinking that it's theirs, and really not knowing the instruments that relate to it are securities, and they're on the stock market, while these people are busting their butt thinking that the car registration means that they own the car. It's a security. And it's on the stock market. And it's leaned against you. And when you think that you're making payments and you say, I made payments, you really ain't made no payments, and that's how it goes in the books. But they talk to you like you made payments. But you're held to the debt, which is only what is called set off. Get that, used to that phrase. Though it's not in here, get read off. Get used to it, set off. Which means it's not satisfied, it's just pushed to the future. Translation is called kicking the can down the road. And guess what they're going to do? Call the debt on you. Are we clear? And that's where we are right now. That's what they're getting ready to do on a massive scale. And so people who have not been interested in this information are going to find themselves in big trouble, because they most likely are not going to have any kind of defense whatsoever. And all that they work for will be liquidated. However, by knowing this, you have an argument. Are we clear? Are we clear?
Yes,
Clear.
That goes for mortgages, houses, estates, your car, and anything else, and the sneaks you got on. And whether the IRS comes for your gear or not. This is, if you understand this, you have the law argument, not legal, lawful argument. Failure to exercise it would be called tacit acquiescence. And write that down, and don't think that they wouldn't take advantage of you as soon as you don't know what the swell you're talking about. This is why all foreclosures, if any one of you in any of the jurisdictions operating on the land in North America, go look at foreclosures, and 90% of your records, you'll see one word come up over and over and over again. That word is called abandonment. Write that down. And the abandonment is referencing to what is called the right of defense by adverse claim, and it's also called abandonment of estate and abandonment of the assets in relationship to the estate. All of those things are what operates when they do foreclosures. Are we clear? So get familiar with them so that you can prepare yourself to make your arguments in these areas, because that's what's going on. And if they can get you to start arguing payments and stuff like that, they got you, because it's not what's happening. Are we clear? And if you start arguing that, they already know they got you. Are we clear?
Clear.
And so we share this information with people so that they, hopefully, that they analyze this stuff and comprehend. Stop thinking that because politicians and people or personnel in government agencies and so-called banks and in law firms thinking that they don't understand this stuff. No, it's that you haven't understood this stuff. And they've been seizing upon people who won't read. And their operations are called barratry and privateering and racketeering and arbitrary and peonage enforcement. It ain't racism. Those are the things that they're doing. All right? Now, I want you to pay particular attention to this paragraph, because part of what we're talking about is reversion of estate, which we went over before. But we want you to understand why we went over it, not that we went over it, so that it becomes your own. Are we clear?
Clear.
Prior to 1913, and you pay attention to dates too, most Americans own clear allodial title. So write down allodial title to property. Free and clear of any liens or mortgages. So write down liens and mortgages and get used to that. And understand in context that it's contrary to allodial title. It's very clear, isn't it? How come no one brings up allodial titles to the people when they're going in the name of buying so-called properties? But they give them mortgages and liens, and then give them deeds, and make them think it's a title of ownership. So we need to be clear on these things, mustn't we?
Yes.
All right. So prior to 1913, most Americans owned clear allodial title of property to property, free and clear of any liens or mortgages, until the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 hypothecated all property within the federal United States to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, in which the trustees, who are stockholders, held legal title. The U.S. citizen, who was designated as tenant and franchisee, so write those down, was registered as a beneficiary to the trust via her birth certificate. In 1933, the Federal United States hypothecated all of the present and future properties, assets, and labor of their quote-unquote subjects, the 14th Amendment U.S. citizens, to the Federal Reserve System. I don't think we need to go further because I'm going to make points on this. Are we clear?
Clear.
So I'm going out of this. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of true history, all right? And this is some base information that all you need to know. The Crown Temple. How many people know the Crown Temple? Raise your hand. By rule of Mystery Babylon, the Templars of the Crown. How many know the Templars of the Crown? Good. Good. But consider this. We're all adults. We have grandchildren and children, nieces and nephews, brothers and sisters, and we're adults studying, and out of the crowd, on both sides of this room, a few hands went up, so it tells you again, even conscious people are in trouble. So just keep that in mind. All right, clear? And then you see why certain things are redundant, Dr. Naila? So those who know this, is it hard for them to take advantage of such persons who sit around and talk with emotion? They'll make a stranger rich. That's why they can come in these communities and get wealthy overnight. And then our people feel secure because they have a lot, they're strong in their beliefs. This stuff is sick. It really is. And then we do it to our children. It wouldn't be so bad if we didn't start and fund a lot of organizations that are alleged to deal with rights and spirituality and cure absolutely nothing. Because it's not what's going on. This is the Crown operations. The governmental and judicial systems operating within the jurisdiction of the United States of America, which are abstract private corporate entities functioning at both federal and local state levels, are owned by the Crown. Are we clear? What's the Crown, y'all? What's the Crown? Come on, talk, please.
Is it England?
Queen. Say it again?
Queen.
That's one. So there's another crown. So this is why I'm giving you the history, so that we can be very clear.
Rome.
It is the Crown Temple. That's why I'm giving you some of this history. All right? So that we can start coming together, sharing, and when certain things are said, that we don't have to redundantly keep going over things. Because when we ask some of these questions, sometimes we don't want to see 3 people in this whole crowd raise their hand. We want to see most of the other people raise their hand and maybe 3 people that don't raise their hand. We need to reverse these numbers. The governmental and judicial systems operating within the jurisdiction of the United States of America, which are abstract private corporate entities functioning at both federal and local state levels, are owned by the Crown, which is a private and foreign power. Before jumping to conclusions about the Queen of England, see, brother? Or about the royal families of Britain owning the USA corporate entity, know that this is a different crown. And this order is fully exposed and explained below. We are specifically referencing the established Templar Church, known for centuries by the world as the Crown. From this point on, we will also refer to the Crown as the Crown Temple or Crown Templar, and all 3 being synonymous. Are we clear? Now remember what I wrote on the board and why I wrote it on the board, because all these things are not necessarily mentioned in here, but they are all related to all of your political, economic issues that you're dealing with today, whether you're buying or selling anything, whether you got a mortgage, whether you think you own a home, whether the IRS comes and gets your stuff, whether you are charged and put in a jail or prison for any purpose. It starts here. It don't start yesterday. Are we clear? And once you understand this, you can begin to take the layers off of the shadow government that many are claiming to expose today and aren't really exposing. They just took the skin off the onion and talking about, well, there ain't no money and therefore, and because there's no gold and silver coin and therefore, and the UCC and therefore, and then there's another layer and then there's another layer. We're taking the layers off. Are we clear? Yeah. So that you can comprehend how the Don actually works. Are we clear? Yeah. So now what is not spoken of here And just like the brother was saying, what's not spoken of here is the Pope. And the Pope's over this. And so what you'll find is that the attorneys are actually deputy knights, which I've always told you all, to enforce the unum sanctum policy. Now, so think for yourselves and understand why the American Constitution, which comes from Muslim law, which Obama exposed to you, why the original article of Amendment 13 disallowed any attorneys, i.e. that you've been trained, or attorneys, or lawyers to hold office in the United States organic under the Republic form of government. And also, you can understand the missionary operations for the overthrow of the Republic and the establishment of the U.S. democracy platform, and why the Sine Die operations in 1861 and the construction of the U.S. democracy platform and the Act of Congress, February the 2nd, 1871, and the fiction that has been promoted ever since that the United States is a country when actually the country is Morocco under occupation under the Spanish Inquisition, governed over and administered over by members of the Roman Curia via their vehicle entity styled as United States Corporation Company that Traficant told you that went bankrupt. See, so once you understand background, you can start tying these things together. If you can't, what happens is when people have you in a legal argument, all they need to go is a little bit deeper and see how far you go in your degrees, and then they defeat you. Are we clear?
Yeah.
So you don't have to argue all this, you need to know this. And this has to be your canvas when you're dealing in your everyday affairs. Are we clear? Also, knowing this, you can analyze the different processes that people come up with in the name of remedy. I said in the name of remedy. At different times and offer to you. As people wake up and they say, well, do this, site draft, HMO, UCCs, birth certificate, authentication, and different things like that. Once you understand this history and understand what's really going on and how far they go into it when they start talking these things, you can tell whether or not they're just taking some of your energy now and you're not going to get remedy, if you get the point. This is why when you really comprehend what's going on, you must go back to that state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers, and you must claim your estate. You must claim it. They can't give you anything. They stole from you. Are we clear? And then they killed your status under unum sanctum and then claimed you dead. And then because they set up trusts in a name that sounds like yours, they've been operating on it systematically. And by generations, they would encroach. And all of their operations have been over periods of years to perfect the platform system by which this is done. And so people who don't understand this can't think that things are planned decades ahead. They can only think current, meaning that they're in a box. Are we clear? So we're sharing this with you so that you can stop getting caught up in your own age of your physical body. And understand real government does not operate on that level. They operate on the principle of generations. But they promote their conversation with you within your cycle. Are we clear? And then they measure things by the calendars, which are political for you, but they actually run the government by sidereal astrology. Are we clear? Reality. Therefore, it is necessary for all persons in government or in industry or in powerful positions or in true social solace systems, whether they're operating legitimately or under a schism, they must belong to secret societies so that they don't believe what they themselves are promoting to the masses. And for those who may be confused, this is why you hear me say sometimes the masses don't get religion. And it doesn't mean that those people aren't sincere. It doesn't mean that they don't have love for or appreciation for that which is divine. But most of them don't know they have not been taught. And that the people who've been teaching them are part of the demon platform, which is they never suspect, which is why this thing has worked for Rome for so many generations, because the very people they've trusted are actually part of the system of the demons. And of course, as you know, it's difficult for people to wrap their head around that. It really is. So you don't get angry at them, you just do the best you can to share and trust that they will see for themselves, not for you, for themselves. And once they begin to see the multi-masks, the multiple masks that are worn by these people, they themselves, when they come to their epiphany, will confess their own and start purging. That's the baptism. And they will be reborn with a new mind, a new mind. However, if they don't know the real history and what's operating, even though they may be passionate, most likely they'll lose. We are trying to accelerate or enumerate winning as opposed to losing, if you get the point. Now, the Templar Church. First, we will note a little historical background, you all. Keep this in mind, because we're not going to go into this, but I'm giving you references so that you can go into this a little bit more in your spare time. The Templar Church was built by the Knights Templar in two parts: the round and the chancel. The round church was consecrated in 1185 and was modeled after the circular church of the Holy Sepulchre located in Jerusalem. The chancel was built in 1240. The temple church serves both the inner and middle temples, see below, and is located between Fleet Street and Victoria Embankment at the Thames River. Its grounds also house the Crown offices at Crown Office Row. This temple church is outside any canonical jurisdiction. Are we clear? And so you're talking about being separate from, though enforcing unum sanctum, is separate from the canonical jurisdiction. And this is again how they hide things. Are we clear? The master of the temple is appointed and takes his place by sealed non-public patent without induction or institution. So you can see the normal process that they operate with the people in general is not what they operate on. Are we clear? Attorneys, get used to that. Attorneys, all licensed bar attorneys, see definitions below because that's another thing, in the U.S. owe their allegiance to and give their solemn oath in pledge to the Crown Temple. Are we clear? Realizing this or not, this is simply due to the fact that all bar associations throughout the world, are we clear, you all? Throughout the world, are signatories and franchises to the International Bar Association located at the Inns of Court at Crown Temple. Are we clear? So get used to that. Inns of Court at Crown Temple, which are physically located at Chancery Lane behind Fleet Street in London, England. Although they vehemently deny it, all bar associations in the U.S., such as the American Bar Association, the Florida Bar, or the California Bar Association, as examples, are franchises to the Crown. Are we clear?
Clear.
Now, for those of you who know the real history, now do you understand when CMA did the Zodiac Constitution? And part of it says when you hire a lawyer, you give him your birthright?
Yes.
And then some people don't understand it. When you understand the history, you know why certain things are said. Now you understand the original Article of Amendment 13 and also why they took it out of the Constitution and don't show it to the people, particularly with its 20 sections, which is called the Nobility Clause. Are we clear? Now do you understand past and present have an absolute connection? And you understand why people, scholars, PhDs, and people in secret society have a different level of knowledge than has been told to you? So I'm sharing this with you to show you that people in government and people who really know religious history have a different frame of thinking when they're talking to you, distinguished from what they're always trying to sell you a belief, knowing that that ain't what's really operating here. But if it keeps you calm while you get raped and they get a piece of the action, is determined where their morality is, whether or not they promote their belief systems, which are solid systems, and then tell you with spirituality, while in the background, they're comfortably living off of you and making you think that there's a separation of church and state. And as you can see, church, state, and the Bar Association are partners. Are we clear? But they know that most of our people don't go past 50 years when they talk about history. And if you take them any further, all they can say is the pyramids in Egypt without no more knowledge than that. And can't fix a house, a door on a house, but they're going to tell you about the pyramids in Egypt. Do you understand? Never read a constitution, never read a treaty, don't know the legal and lawful phrases within them instruments, and yet they affect every phase of your life economically and politically. Are we clear? Now, so the Spanish Inquisition, when you're looking at the Spanish Inquisition, you can go to unum sanctum, right? Then the round, the chancel, the returns, the dead pledge, the mortgages, and the straw man. All of that is related. The straw man that you see in the 14th Amendment that everybody talks about is enforced by the attorneys that you call attorneys, that you think is sitting around trying to protect your rights. Now you understand why they were, by Constitution principle, disallowed to hold office in the United States, the organic United States that they overthrew, that most of the people don't even know was overthrown. Are we clear? The four ends of court, the ends of court, the four ends of court to the Crown Temple, use the banking and judicial system of the City of London, a sovereign and independent territory, which is not a part of Great Britain, just as Washington City, the District of Columbia was called in the 1800s, is not a part of the North American states, nor is the District of Columbia a state within the Republic. Are we clear? Those entities are established to defraud, to coerce, and to manipulate the American people. That's why they exist. And they're connected. Now you understand the secret treaty of Verona? That also read in the House in the records, 1884. Then you understand when you go to Berlin, Germany, the Berlin Conference, 1884, where they were dividing amongst the Constantinian nations under the disguise of Christian nations, dividing up the Ottoman Empire, which is a cover for the Saadian dynasty, which is the remnants of the Moorish Empire. And so you understand why different words and different names are used to hide the history that's right in your face. And then why the heirs to this great estate that has been stolen over these centuries, why they use the brand system to disconnect the heirs from the heirship. And this is why the nom de guerres such as Negro, Black, and Colored and West Indian are used in modern linguistics, connotative semantic linguistics, and in the school systems controlled by members of the Skull and Bones in order to keep the heirs unaware of this actual history. And therefore the system works quite well. And those people who are under that system actually think, because they've been trained like little rats from childhood, there's a separation of church and state. And the reason they don't pay taxes is because the 10% is Jesus's. You know, and they really, and this is what's really operating. Are we clear? Then when they walk into those trading venues, which are auction blocks, they themselves keep calling them courts. Are we clear?
Clear.
Because they think it ended in 1865. Are we clear?
Clear.
And again, we won't go too much further than this, but I want to mention something else to you. I want to read this out and then I want to mention something to you. See how I have on the board, remember the Conversos?
Yes.
How many of you know what Conversos are and who they are? I know you know. You can give her a mic. Pass it down. Who are Conversos?
Those are the ones that
The ones of whose?
the Moors or the Asiatics
Yes.
who were obliged to convert to Christianity. If they didn't convert, then they would either burn them or ostracize them or put them out of existence, I guess, you know.
And there was also those who betrayed their own. So they're generally packaged by the Constantinians as Conversos. And your so-called black leaders are always picked by the corporate entities from the package, or what you call the populace of what is known as Conversos. And so on the surface, they will call themselves Christian ministers. Those are Conversos. Are we clear? This is why you find, if you do the research on almost every so-called black leader, girl and guy, at North America, or Negroite, whatever they call themselves, if you do background 9 times out of 10, you can put Reverend in front of their name. They are Conversos. Are we clear? And that's not condemning people who come into the churches or coming into the communities honestly and sincerely trying to help. We're talking the truth of the real history, and we need to get over ourselves and start dealing with the realities and understand why things have not worked well for us over the generations. Because we really don't know the history. We claim to do, but when you test most people, they don't know this history, not for real. And most so-called black leaders will stay away from this like it's the plague. Because they're part of it. Because the Conversos are usually the ones that promote the Constantinian order under the guise of Christianity and get paid. So logically, they don't want you to know this history. All right, and then so if you want to talk about history, they'll skip all of this and go and talk about the pyramids in Egypt and Kemet, and you know, it's all deep. And the stuff that's really affecting you every day, that really screw you, that tears up your family, that's right contemporary, they stay away from it. Because that's the real politics, although it's tied to the past. Are we clear? So the ends of court to the Crown Temple use the banking and judicial system of the City of London, a sovereign and independent territory which is not a part of Great Britain, just as Washington City, the District of Columbia, was called in the 1800s, is not a part of the North American states, nor is the District of Columbia a state within the Republic. Now you understand why the people in Washington, D.C. can't vote? And they'll sit around and argue about, we want our right to vote. They don't even understand the real politics. It's not a part of the United States. It's a jurisdiction, and this is where we have to get our people clear in understanding what jurisdiction means. It does not necessarily mean the physical land. And so people who don't understand jurisdiction think if it's on the land, it's the United States. Their concepts are wrong. And then they think the United States is a country, so it confuses them. Do you understand?
Yes.
But when you understand the real history, it's not moral, it's not ethical, but you really understand why people in Washington can't vote. And it's correct that they can't vote, and they shouldn't be able to vote. They're foreigners. Do you understand? And don't know it.
Islam.
So a person was called Negro, Black, and Colored on the 14th Amendment, foreigners. But go ahead.
Islam.
Islam.
What you now said about people don't know about the United States not being a country, right? The thing is that the whole planet believes that the United States is a country.
No, they don't.
But I mean, they have us here in the United
Yes,
States
yes.
believe that everybody on the planet believe it is.
Let us qualify that.
All right, qualified.
Let's qualify that.
Yes.
How many of you remember when William Clinton was praetor for the United States Corporation Company, and he was introduced on the floor at the United Nations? And I'm not sure, I think it was Vincente Fox.
Oh, yeah,
Vincente Fox. And they said,
yeah.
and presenting
The president.
the American president.
Yeah.
And he was walking up. He didn't have a sax though. He was right.
But Vincente said
And
something.
Vicente Fox said, object. Object. Let's make this very clear. Bill Clinton is the president of the United States. And this room is filled with American presidents, of which I am one. Give us respect. How many people under the black codes that went over their head and still does? And if you make that issue to them, most of them still don't get it. Because they're under the spell of semantic linguistics. They think, like children and minorities, they're just big.
Adults.
Think that America is a country. Children in first grade in other countries know that America is a continent. And adults in the Western Hemisphere think America is a country and speak of it in that context and don't know they're incompetent. And not knowing that when they make such statements that they've absorbed the debt or accepted the debt that belongs to the United States Corporation Company, faithing as Americans, and they are U.S. subjects. Because they'll say, you're a U.S. citizen? Yeah, I'm a U.S. citizen. That's U.S. stock. And the U.S. corporate Congress are really an oligarchy, board of trustees for the crown. And they're legislating color of law for colored people. And that's the source of their wealth. Are we clear?
Clear.
So, these Fleet Street bankers and lawyers are committing crimes in America under the guise and color of law. See definitions for legal and lawful below, which you all see later. I'm not going to go into that right now. They are known collectively as the Crown. The Crown's operatives acting as lawyers are actually Templar Bar attorneys, IES, not EYS, and are not lawyers.
Islam.
Are we clear, y'all?
That's right.
The present Queen of England is not the crown, quote unquote, as we have all been falsely led to believe. Rather, the crown is the bankers and attorneys who are the actual crown or crown temple. The monarch aristocrats of England have not been ruling sovereigns since the reign of King John circa 1215. All royal sovereignty of the old British crown since that time has passed to the crown temple in Chancery. Now you see why when they're foreclosing on people's houses in North America, they send them to Chancery Court. Now do you understand why we tell people, declare your nationality and make reversion of a state? And comprehend what we're trying to tell you? Because every process that they tell you or offer to you will be a failure. It's only for them to buy time. Are we clear? And if it were not for the Manchurians putting a check on the European operations now, you would be in worse shape now, and half the people more would be dead physically if they hadn't been put in check. And the others would have been on the curb. Are we clear?
Like Los Angeles.
Now, the Romans are accelerating their activities, and therefore, we cannot continue to afford to have these meetings and ask people, do they know these things? And then you have out of a crowd of tons of adults, 3 people raise their hand. We can't continue that pattern. Are we clear?
Clear.
And so, you know, certain things we do redundantly, but it becomes necessary. It doesn't make sense to tell people to go to the well and take water home to their family when they keep coming with beautiful buckets, but they all got holes in them. And then say what they want to hear, as opposed to what they need to understand. Don't go to the well with holes in the bucket. All right? So we ask you, when you come here to the House of Reawakening Minds, please bring a pen and a pencil, take notes, and understand much of the responsibility for comprehending this stuff is your own, not us, not ours. We just share. Are we clear? Because ultimately, the right of claim, according to law, is predicated on your capacity to exercise what is known as the common law, which is in place traditionally and trumps the canon law. Are we clear? And is predicated on the honors of your mothers and your fathers. This is where nationality comes in. This is why when you see nation states around the world, whether you're dealing with a positive position or a negative position, when it comes to a nation going down the tubes, the ultimate social, political, sovereign power that is used to save that nation is called nationalization. Whether you're talking about Fidel Castro, whether you're talking about Chavez, or whether you're talking about Adolf Hitler, they all nationalized their countries to save it. The other issues, whether positively or in their intent or action, or positive and negative, is secondary to that issue. Are we clear? The saving power on a political forum is nationalization. You need to know that. Failure to know that pretty much guarantees that the crown will have your crown, which is greatly much to do with why we're still in trouble while marching all over the place. Generation after generation, to no avail. Are we clear? So I wanted to go into the foreign's court and the crown, the 2 crowns, and let you know their relationship. Now, their relationship, which I don't talk about in here, but in another lesson, is their secret Treaty of Verona, which you also have on your flash drive. So these things you have to put together. You have to recognize these things. You have to start recognizing the facets of things. And it has to be part of your thinking canvas. Are we clear? Because we're here at the House of Reawakening Minds for you to redeem yourself. Not for you to clap because we said something that's humorous or great. Oh, wow, that's deep. Yay. Please don't do that. Let's try to fix some things. And I know it's difficult because we're creatures of habit. But let's try to get some things grounded for the generations to come. Now understand, Rome's position is if they eliminate you, you won't have an opportunity to pass it on. And this is why they're doing or accelerating false flags and a lot of other things that they're doing. Are we clear? And also why they're trying to start openly World War III, which they already started in 1929, actually. All right, with biological warfare. And the silent weapons for quiet wars. And they're talking now to fear people, put fear in people, threatening about the Third World War when they know it started in 1929. And it's been active ever since. And this is where you and your families have been constantly going downhill, generation after generation. And the reason, because you didn't know that they were still waging war. And so therefore your guard was down. Are we clear? Meanwhile, they had black leaders claiming religion, marching you all around the place, keeping you busy, while in secret they were getting paid. And so now we've had a couple of generations sacrificed and lacking knowledge and lacking activity And so you're at an extreme disadvantage. And so the study must be sincere. But understand this too at the same time. Mother Nature is merciful. And the deal is from the divine order, all knowledge is already in you anyway.
Wow.
So the deal is, how do you activate the DNA to activate or to bring that knowledge back to the surface, i.e. some people say attach back to the Akashic record, or that's the electrical grid that's in nature, or the knowing, or like the Bible would say, you know, just open your mouth and I'll speak for you. What that really implies in the one who's attached to the Akashic record, that's what that really means. That means your level of sincerity will determine the, you might say, the wattage and the voltage to the electrical grid that's in nature, not through some copper wire that's actually in the atmosphere, that actually brings the remedy, not me telling you or you telling me. We can help each other by sharing information, but your sincerity with the divine activates the DNA memory that's in you. And you will just simply know. And so one of the keys that, for anyone that's been in any what you call privy council organization and have been taken through chambers to be given a degree of adeptship, one of the keys or one of the degrees they take you through is called sincerity. And then you'll understand what that means. Because that activates the chakras. Now that's key, so I'm just throwing that at you. You know, because a lot of times when we're talking to people, they'll ask questions and ask you to tell them something, and you can tell them absolutely true, and they still won't get it. It's according to their sincerity, because nature is the one that gives it to you. It is the divine mother, or what you call Allah, Adonai, etc. All mean the same thing. The divine cosmic mother, what we call God.
Holy breath.
One of the gods, anyway. Now, which ones, you know, that's another issue, isn't it? Because there's a lot of them. So what harmonizes with you? What proof do you have of your gods that you've been claiming? The only first proof that you have is the acknowledgement of your mothers and fathers. And any man that claims not to have a belly button is a liar. Because that's the only proof he has of his origin. And everything after that is speculation. This is why the divine rule is honor your mothers and your fathers, that your days may be longer upon the earth land which the Lord thy God has given thee. Rule, honor not your mothers and fathers, and more than likely you're going to serve another man. This is the source of our misery. This is why the Romans put their names on our people as a curse. And anything that they've been buying or selling with that mark or that number of the name, the European has been claiming through what? Through the crown. So when you see bankers, heads of bankers and everything, and they're doing all kind of criminality, and people say, they're doing all kind of criminality, you never go to jail. Now you understand why. They keep thinking that the judiciary and the church and the state are separate. They're a club, all of them, and you're the food. Get over it. Now, when you change your state of mind, nature will change your state of your condition. Are we clear? However, it must be sincere. And if you want to save yourself, save someone who doesn't know. Tell them the truth without a hook, without some idea that you're going to get in their pockets. Just tell them because it's right. Are we clear? And we're not saying a servant ain't worthy of her hire, or a servant ain't worthy of his hire, but beyond that is thievery. Are we clear? All right. Now, are there any questions in relationship? So when you're looking at these attorneys, start calling them attorneys. Are we clear?
Clear.
Don't call them lawyers. Stop calling these persons who claim to be judges, call them administrators, administrative clerks, because that's who they are. Stop calling these people congressmen, because they're not congressmen and senators. They're private kingship oligarch members of the Roman Curia, enforcing the issues of the crown, i.e. unum sanctum. This is why nothing they do ever benefits the people. Never. It always costs you. Are we clear? They're there to drain you, no different than a spider drains the carcass of a bug. And then when you have no substance, they drop you on a pile beneath the web. Are we clear? This is why they have a web in the corners of the Federal Reserve note. Are we clear?
There.
So you look at the Federal Reserve note, you'll see a web
Yeah.
in the corner. It's predicated on the black widow spider. Are we clear?
There.
And the black widow, now you understand when they talk about the black pope, and then they talk about the Queen of England, then they talk about Washington, D.C., district for the Roman goddess, Columbia, and you're the food. Are we clear? So I'm just taking you a little bit into history so you can comprehend a little better much of what you already know, and you can put some things together. But the major thing that I'm trying to present to you is no matter what they tell you, don't trust them. Trust yourself. Trust your inner mind, but not based on beliefs, based on knowledge. Are we clear?
Clear.
And you need each other. Like the prophet said, Noble Drawley says, you need each other now, but you're going to need each other even more so after a while, in reference to the European living off your virtues. So, even though we're not going into this too deep at this moment, how many of you knew the four ends of the court? Four ends of court. How many of you knew the two crowns, the two different crowns? The brother was aware of the crown, but immediately you're dealing with the Queen of England, knowing about the secret treaty of Verona. But I just want to show you how the layers are there. That's what I'm saying. The unseen layers. You see? So even when you see the Europeans and others revealing some of the truths, you notice that they only go so far, because they're still trying to steal your birthright. Because they're, how do you say, two thieves arguing about the spoils that they took from you. And some of our people say, see, they're doing it to them too. Well, the bikes that both of them are riding belong to you, but we shouldn't understand this. You understand? Because a lot of our people, you know, rather than take responsibility for what's going on, they'll start noting what's happening lately, where the corporate entities are throwing the middle-class Europeans under the bus too. See, they're doing it to them too. Not knowing that their middle-class jobs were predicated on the theft of your birthright.
Islam.
All right? However, it doesn't mean that you don't have compassion for them, because you should. However, but you're the heir, and don't get that twisted. So the USA, which is a private for-profit and foreign corporation, is not the free and sovereign nation that the de facto federal government personnel tells us that it is, although they are beneficiaries of its largesse, color,